On these next four, we're given the equation, and we're trying to graph those on these graphs. So you should know already how to do this. If you get stuck, if you forget what slope and y-intercept really mean, you can always use a table and just plug in some numbers and see what kind of points we get for those. But we'll find that slope and y-intercept are way easier to use. You don't have to actually plug in anything. Always start with the y-intercept. Wherever the y-intercept is, that tells us where our graph starts, where it hits this y-axis. So I see that my b equals 4. That's the first point on this graph. 0, 4 is where this graph starts. And then I see I have a -1/2 as my slope. That means my rise over run is -1/2. That's telling you instructions on where to go next. It's saying go down 1 and over 2. Down 1, over 2. That's the next point. I'm going to erase that part in the middle. But it's telling us that is where the next point is. You're going down 1 and over 2 to get to the next point. And you can keep doing that as far as you can. Keep going down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2. Keep doing that as far as you can go. That tells us where the next point is. Make sure you get a straight line with this, otherwise you're doing something wrong. You can also go backwards on this. If you imagine that you went down 1 over 2 to get to this point, you had to go back 2 and up 1. Back to up 1, back to up 1, back to up 1. That gives us our straight line. And actually, we want to put arrows on the end of this to show that that goes on forever in both directions. Start with your y-intercept, and then just count out your rise and run. It's the exact same thing we're going to do on this next one. Before I get into that, actually, I want to talk about what that slope means. That slope equals 3. A slope of 3 is really saying that I have a rise and run of 3 over 1. Those are the same thing. 3 over 1 is really just the same thing as 3. I'm just writing that like that so I can see that my rise and run both have numbers attached to them. My rise is 3, so I'm going up 3 and running 1. I'm still not going to start out with that point. I'm going to start out with my y-intercept that starts at positive 2. I'm starting at 2, and I'm rising 3 and running over just one spot. Rising 3 and running over one spot. Remember, you just have to plot 3 points on these to confirm that you actually have a straight line. 2 points doesn't do it. You have to plot at least 3. So if those 3 points are all you need, then you're good. Sometimes you will have to count backwards. So we'll need to know that we have to go back 1 and down 3 to get to the previous point. Back 1, down 3, back 1, down 3. That gives us the 3 points that we need. Kind of missed a little bit. We also want to make sure that we have 2 arrows. It goes on forever in both directions. All right, on number 8, we don't have a number in front of our x. There is no number there. There's really a 1 in front of it. So we actually have the number 1 in front of that. It's just to signify that we have 1x. We don't actually need to write that, but you need to know that if there is no number in front of the x, it's actually a 1x. So that's telling me my rise over run is equal to 1. So we can think of that as 1 over 1. You can think of that as 2 over 2, 3 over 3. You can count out any of those rises and runs. It actually doesn't matter. I'm going to use 1 over 1 just because that's the simplest. I'm just counting 1. But you can use all of those. Those all simplify to 1. I'm going to start at my y-intercept. I'm going to start at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And count a rise and run of 1 and 1. Up 1, over 1. And I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go back 1 and down 1. And that gives me my straight line. the next one, I'm actually going to show you a way to rearrange this if you want to. You don't have to write it like this, but I think it's a little bit clearer. You can write this as y equals negative x plus 5. Those are the exact same thing. This is something that you really need to get comfortable with. A negative x and a minus x are the exact same thing. The sign in front of the number is attached to that number. The sign directly in front of the x is attached to that number. The 5 is not being subtracted. This is a positive 5. So we write that as a plus 5. That tells us where to start our graph. We're going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up from the y-axis, from the x-axis. Our y-intercept is a positive 5. And our slope is negative 1, which is the same thing as negative 1 over 1. So I'm going to go down 1 and over 1. And you can go with that as far as you possibly can. Down 1 over 1 each time, or I can count backwards. Back 1, to the left 1, and then up 1. It's the exact same thing going forwards and backwards. And you can see the negative slope matches up with our negative slope in our equation, and the positive y-intercept, the positive b, matches up with the positive b in our equation.